Good morning, Christopher.
Good morning, Agata.
Let's discuss now about a very interesting topic, very dynamic topic about the supplier auditing. I would like to hear your experiences and your maybe audit criteria you're following in the charge cars manufacturing.
Yeah, so supply auditing is needed in charge cars as well as in general in the OEM sphere to identify gaps and weaknesses, risk of conformity of production. So as an overall equipment manufacturer, we're responsible for the homologation and compliance of that vehicle to the final customer as well as the regulation bodies in each country. Each country has their own laws and requirements, safety requirements, and so on, emissions. We need to make sure that we comply. So from the first instance, supply auditing is really important from that perspective, that we comply with production requirements in and any of the laws. It's also used to further understand the general day-to-day of the operations of the supplier. So it's a snapshot in time. Usually, supplier audits can last from anywhere from maybe a week if it's more intensive on the quality management system, looking at all areas of the business, not just quality itself. In some cases, it can be more prescribed, and it's a more specific audit on the product itself or the process that it's come from. There's only so much that ISO 9001 and IATF will find. Obviously, suppliers tend to prepare themselves for these audits. They have the guidelines, they have the knowledge. They usually have internal and second-party auditors trained, lead auditors, to manage those things. And there's only so much that I can do. Having a customer audit is really important because it will help them from an outsider perspective understand where the gaps are, because our suppliers in general, as well as in other companies that I've worked for, have this kind of approach where they think everything's okay because they have a certificate, but actually it's the day-to-day operations which is really important, not that one-time event where they've managed to get the certificate. Having different types of audits are critical to capture issues. Having a process audit, which is looking at the control plan, the failure mode effect analysis, and the process flow diagram to see, is it mapped out correctly? Is there any risks, any bottlenecks, or failure modes, or safety characteristics or special characteristics that need to be captured? Um, the product audits are important to look, for correlation. If they measure, do we measure the same thing? When a part received a charge, did we find the same sort of dimensions or same issues? Is the measurement method correct? Are they measuring with the right resolution equipment from an MSA perspective or gauge R&R? And are we doing the same thing? So in some cases, I've experienced where people internally on some of the OEMs I've worked for may use the wrong equipment, and it's a kind of a knowledge sharing. So the suppliers advise the other way around. So we are fact finding and learning from them as well. It's also used for new part introduction. So we will develop a supplier over many months, or we'll audit them. Every time you visit a supplier, subconsciously we are auditing them, and sometimes suppliers don't realize that is that we are checking to see, are they growing and maturing and getting better as a supplier, or are they declining? Are the management engaged? We will look at that as well. From a PPAP validation perspective, we do run at rate trials. We'll do that sort of check where we'll give a supplier an interim part submission warrant approval for a limited production run. On the day, if they pass, then they could get full approval depending on if the design is fully frozen and so on at that stage. Finally, we'll look at things like life cycle management, which is change management. If there's a styling change or a cost down or a quality up change that might come from us to the supplier, we may need to go to the supplier and do an audit to make sure they are ready for the change. Do they have the right people? Do they have the right training? Is it being processed within their organization?
Have you ever used an audit to do by yourself a product audit at the supplier?
Yeah. So quite frequently. So when I first started my career in automotive, I was a quality technician and a supplier. Then I joined, Nissan as a parts inspector, which is supplier quality assurance specifically, where they do, incoming checks as well as production concerns that they check. When I became a parts quality engineer or an SQA engineer, one of the things that I do is I would go to the supplier and do the product check as well. So normally you do them both at the same time. You do like a control plan audit, which might last a minimum of 2 or 3 days, depending on the size of the organization and how good the control plan is. But you'd also sample the product. If you haven't got all of the time in the world, you look at maybe key characteristics or special ones first and then general sampling. But if you have the full time, you would do all the features, all the appearance. If it's gloss, appearance, paint, all these things, you would check with the supplier so we have the same understanding.
The same method
Yes,
for
same method of assessment. I've had ones where if it's visual assessment of color, the supplier might work to a yellow lamp instead of the correct D65 at the right resolution with the right lux intensity. So there's things where there's lessons learned and knowledge, as we've said in previous videos. It's really important to develop the supplier, even if they have IETF. IETF is not going to teach them that specific product information detail about the process and the part. So there's things like that where we have to have customer specific requirements, not just in terms of the quality management system, but in the product itself, we have customer specific requirements.
Yes, ITF is very general, let's say,
Yeah.
frankly. So second party audits at the supplier can also be done for the monitoring of the risk connected to the supplier, which we may have in this corporation. For the development of the supplier, yes, the initial state, for instance, when the supplier, where the supplier is on his path in the development. Did you try to use the second party audits also for regular monitoring? You maybe had some really critical issues.
There's elements of that. So usually OEMs don't tend to tread on the toes of IETF directly. So what we will do is we will take elements within the second party auditor, because I can't say to a supplier, you failed your IETF, for example, because I'm not a third party auditor. I can't give them the accreditation. I can't say there's a minor non-conformance officially, and I can't say a major. But based on my training and my understanding, because I'm a lead auditor for internal and second party, I could say based on this criteria, this is where your gaps are. But it can only be used as feedback. It couldn't be used as to say you're definitely wrong to that requirement, because I would need a certified auditor to do that from the third party perspective. But what I can do is, as head of quality, I can adopt the practices and best principles, which comes full circle. It becomes a customer specific requirement. So then I impose that on you instead. So it's kind of, instead of saying you are failing or you'll have a minor non-conformance for IETF, what I can do is I can adopt that auditing criteria, and I can put it into my order criteria as a customer, and which is what I've done. I've done that in previous companies, and I've done that in charge. And it's really important to have alignment to the standards, so that we are speaking the same language and we have the same criteria. And it makes sense, because some suppliers have said to me in the past, "Oh, IETF says you don't need to do that." And I say, I think you'll find that on, if I look at the interpretation correctly, it says you do need to do this. So there's been times when I need to challenge suppliers based on their understanding of the audit versus mine. So
Yes, challenge suppliers.
yeah.
Okay, let's stop in this moment, not to challenge more. Okay, let's meet for another episode, Christopher. Let's talk about the supplier approval. Okay, the products and the process approval from the suppliers being more precise. So thank you for today.